My name is Camille Rowan. I was 34 years old, a pediatric respiratory therapist, Sabrina Rowan's older sister, and Derek Hall's fiancé. At least, I was still wearing Derek's ring when I walked into a private room at the Riverfront Hotel on my sister's wedding morning and placed a plain white envelope in front of her groom. Julian Price looked from the envelope to me. His bow tie hung loose around his collar, and the ceremony he had spent a year planning was less than 4 hours away. His older brother, Marcus, stood near the closed door, watching me with the guarded expression of a best man who had agreed to this meeting only because I said Julian's future depended on it. "Camille, what is this?" Julian asked. My fingers would not release the envelope. Makeup covered most of the mark on my left cheek, but it could not hide the swelling. My engagement ring tapped softly against the paper. "Last night, I found Sabrina with Derek." Julian's face remained still. "Found them doing what?" I had rehearsed a careful answer on the drive back to the hotel. It disappeared when he looked at me. "They were kissing, and the messages in this envelope prove it didn't begin last night." Marcus shifted away from the door. Julian did not. He stared at the envelope as if touching it would make the room tilt beneath him. Then he noticed my cheek. Did Derek do that? No, Sabrina did. For the first time, something broke through his composure. Not belief yet, not anger, fear. He understood that I had not interrupted his wedding morning over a misunderstanding, but he still had no idea how long the two people we trusted had been lying to us, or why my own mother had asked me to let him marry Sabrina before I told him. If you believe people deserve the truth before making life-changing promises, subscribe to the channel, turn on the notification bell, and like this video. Tell me whether you would have handed Julian that envelope, because before this story is over, you may understand why my hands would not stop shaking. To explain what Julian read, I have to go back 18 hours to when I still believed the worst problem in our family was a missing box of place cards. The hotel stood beside the river in downtown Columbus, all restored brick, tall windows, and polished brass. Sabrina had chosen it because the ceremony terrace caught the sunset and the reception hall photographed beautifully. By 6 on Friday evening, nearly everyone involved in the rehearsal had arrived, except the florist's assistant carrying the replacement centerpieces. I had come directly from a 12-hour hospital shift. I changed into my blue rehearsal dress in a staff restroom, pinned my hair in the elevator, and reached the terrace in time to stop my mother from moving 80 chairs herself. "Thank God," Denise Rowan said when she saw me. She pressed a clipboard into my hands without asking whether I had eaten. "The place cards are in the wrong boxes. Sabrina can't find her second pair of shoes, and Julian's aunt says her room has only one towel." "I'll handle the cards. The front desk can handle the towel." "Sabrina has 3 pairs of shoes upstairs." Mom exhaled as if I had turned off an alarm. "This is why I can depend on you." In my family, that sentence had always sounded like praise. I did not yet understand how often it meant that everyone else was permitted to fall apart because I would not. Sabrina swept onto the terrace 10 minutes later in a white jumpsuit, smiling as though she had not called me 4 times that afternoon about ribbon colors. She was 3 years younger than me, beautiful in the bright, restless way that made strangers turn toward her. When we were children, I braided her hair before school and waited outside the principal's office whenever she got in trouble. As adults, she still called me first when her life became too loud. She kissed my cheek and studied the clipboard. "You fixed it?" "I'm fixing it." "Same thing." She linked her arm through mine. "I don't know what I'd do without you." I believed her affection. That mattered. Sabrina had not spent our entire lives pretending to love me. The betrayal that followed was possible because much of our bond had been real. Julian joined us near the ceremony arch. He was steady where Sabrina was restless, a structural engineer who checked every promise the way he checked a set of plans. When the coordinator changed the processional order, he listened, asked one question, and adjusted. He trusted Sabrina enough not to monitor every mood or private conversation. Nothing about that trust made him foolish. Derek arrived while we were lining up. He slipped one hand around my waist and handed me a wrapped sandwich with the other. That was the shape of our relationship. I handled emergencies. Derek reminded me to eat after them. When his sales territory collapsed 2 years earlier, I had paid more of our bills and listened through every doubt. I never kept score. I believed partnership meant carrying more weight when the other person stumbled. I did not know he had begun treating my steadiness as something he could use without protecting. "I know you skipped dinner," he murmured. That small act felt like proof of the future I thought we shared. Derek and I had been together 5 years and engaged for 14 months. Our wedding was planned for the fall, 5 months after Sabrina's, because I had agreed that my family should survive one ceremony before preparing for another. Derek had been disappointed by the delay, but he had kissed my forehead and said he understood. Standing beside him at the rehearsal, I mistook his practiced warmth for forgiveness. "Next time we do this," he said, glancing toward the arch, "you're the one walking toward me." I squeezed his hand. "You'd better show up." He smiled. "Try keeping me away." The rehearsal ended without disaster. We moved into a private dining room where both families gathered for dinner and informal toasts. I corrected the place cards, found Sabrina's shoes, spoke to the front desk, and finally sat beside Derek as coffee was served. Julian's father stood to welcome Sabrina into their family. Mom touched my shoulder and whispered that our own family toast would come next. She looked toward Sabrina's chair. It was empty. "Where did she go?" Mom asked. "Probably upstairs," I said. Sabrina had left her phone beside her glass, so I could not call her. I turned to ask Derek whether he had seen her. His chair was empty too. 5 minutes earlier, he had leaned close and told me a client was calling. I had watched him leave through the side door with his phone against his palm, still dark and silent. Mom pushed the bridal suite keycard toward me. "Please find your sister. Everyone is waiting." I took the card and crossed the hotel lobby. At that point, I was annoyed, not suspicious. Sabrina had disappeared during important moments before, and Derek's clients ignored dinner hours regularly. I did not connect those absences until the elevator opened on the bridal floor. The hallway was empty. The suite door stood fully closed, but someone inside laughed softly. It was Derek. I stopped with the key card halfway to the lock. For several seconds, I did nothing. The sensible part of my mind offered explanations faster than I could reject them. Maybe he had followed Sabrina upstairs because she was upset. Maybe she had asked him to fix something. Maybe I had mistaken another man's voice for the voice I had heard beside me every morning for 5 years. Then Sabrina said his name. She did not sound upset. She sounded breathless and amused. I slid the keycard through the lock. The green light flashed. The door opened into a sitting area crowded with garment bags, makeup cases, and flower boxes. At first, I saw only Derek's jacket across the back of a chair. Then I saw him beside the vanity, his tie loosened and both hands around my sister's waist. Sabrina's fingers were buried in his hair. They were kissing with the ease of people who did not need to discover where the other person would move next. The door struck the wall behind me. They separated. Derek wiped his mouth. Sabrina stared at me through the mirror, one hand still resting against his chest. No one spoke until I looked at Derek's dark phone on the vanity and understood why his client had never called. "How long?" I asked. Sabrina stepped away from him. "Camille, calm down." "How long?" "You walked in at a bad moment," Derek said. His sales voice was already in place, low, reasonable, built to make the person across from him feel unreasonable for resisting. She was overwhelmed. We were talking and it crossed a line. I looked at Sabrina. "Your wedding is tomorrow." Her expression hardened, not with guilt but irritation. "Do you think I forgot? And he is my fiancé. Stop saying it like I planned this." I glanced from her swollen lips to Derek's loosened tie. "Then tell me what I'm looking at." Derek moved toward me. One stupid kiss. "That's what you're looking at." I stepped back before he could touch me. "Did it happen before tonight?" "No," he said too quickly. Sabrina folded her arms. She had always hated being questioned after she had decided a subject was closed. At 16, she had wrecked Mom's car and cried until everyone discussed how frightened she was, instead of why she had taken the keys. At 24, she had borrowed money from me, missed every repayment, and accused me of humiliating her when I finally asked about it in front of Mom. I had mistaken those episodes for immaturity that love would eventually soften. Now she looked at the red mark my engagement ring had left against Derek's collar and said, "You came barging into my bridal suite. What did you expect?" The question was so distorted that I almost laughed. "I expected to find my sister. You found me, now leave. Not until one of you tells me the truth." I took out my phone. I was not recording. I only wanted to call Julian, but Sabrina lunged before I unlocked the screen. Her palm struck the left side of my face hard enough to turn my head. The sound seemed louder than it could have been. "Stay away from my personal matters," she said. My cheek burned. For a moment, the room went perfectly still. Derek caught Sabrina by the forearm. "What are you doing?" She jerked free. She was about to destroy everything. I pressed my fingertips beneath my eye. "You mean tell Julian? You don't know what you saw." "I know what kissing looks like." "Then you know it can happen once and mean nothing." Derek looked relieved that she had handed him an explanation. "She's right. It meant nothing, Camille. Sabrina panicked about tomorrow. I was trying to calm her down." We both lost our heads for a second. "And your phone?" He glanced toward the vanity. "I came up here after my call. Your screen was dark when you left the table." His eyes shifted. It was a small movement, but I had spent 5 years learning his face. "I was calling the client back," he said. Sabrina picked up the bridal suite keycard I had dropped and held it toward me. "Go downstairs. Put some ice on your face. We will discuss this after the wedding, when everyone is thinking clearly." There it was, the solution my family had used for years. I would absorb the injury, fix my expression, and postpone my truth until Sabrina's feelings were safe. I did not take the card. "Julian is making vows tomorrow," I said. "He gets to know what he's making them to." Sabrina's confidence flickered. Derek stepped between us. "Come home with me," he said. "We'll talk privately. Don't drag both families into something we can resolve." Both families, not our relationship. Not my sister, not what he had done. He was already calculating the size of the audience he needed to contain. I walked out. Derek followed me as far as the elevator, but I pressed the close button before he reached it. Through the narrowing gap, I saw Sabrina appear behind him. She clutched the front of her white jumpsuit closed, watching me with the frightened fury of someone who still believed the greatest betrayal in that hallway was mine. The elevator carried me past the rehearsal dinner and down to the parking garage. My face throbbed in time with my heartbeat. I sat behind the wheel without starting the car and stared at the ring on my left hand. My phone began vibrating. Derek called first. I let it stop. He called again, then sent a message asking me to come home so he could explain the one mistake he had made while helping Sabrina through a panic attack. Sabrina's message arrived less than a minute later. She said I had invaded a private moment, misunderstood what I saw, and responded with the same jealousy I had supposedly shown whenever the family celebrated her. She ended by reminding me that 200 guests would be humiliated if I acted before I calmed down. Neither message contained an apology. Mom called next. I answered because I knew she would come looking for me otherwise. "Where are you?" she asked. Voices and silverware filled the background. "Your father is waiting to give the toast." I had to leave. "Why?" I looked at my reflection in the rearview mirror. A red outline had formed across my cheek. Something happened with Sabrina. Mom sighed. "Of course it did. Can this wait until morning?" I could have told her then. I nearly did. But Sabrina and Derek were still upstairs, close enough to create one polished explanation before I found words for what I had seen. "I don't know," I said. "Camille, please. This weekend is important to her." That sentence settled my next decision. I ended the call and drove to the condominium I shared with Derek. I was not going there to search his private life. I wanted clothes for the night, the work bag I had left in the kitchen, and enough distance to decide whether I could believe an explanation that contradicted my own eyes. The apartment looked exactly as it had that morning, Derek's shoes were beneath the entry bench. Our fall wedding invitation samples covered one end of the dining table. A photograph from our engagement party stood beside the lamp, showing Sabrina between us with one arm around each of our shoulders. I turned the photograph face down. My overnight bag was in the bedroom closet. I had packed 2 shirts when a notification sounded in the kitchen. The tablet stood on its charging dock beneath the cabinets. Derek had bought it 3 years earlier for recipes, music, and household accounts. I used it most mornings. He had used it during a sales trip months ago and apparently never disconnected one of his messaging profiles. The notification banner showed Sabrina's name. Delete everything, she saw us. Keep saying it was the first time. I read the sentence twice. The message disappeared from the top of the screen, but the account icon remained. I touched it. A muted conversation opened beneath Sabrina's name. There were hundreds of messages. The newest ones had been sent while I was sitting in the parking garage. Derek warned Sabrina not to contact him until he could get my phone and determine what I had recorded. Sabrina told him I had no proof and would eventually do what Mom asked. Then she instructed him to remove their photographs from his phone before coming home. My knees weakened. I sat on the kitchen floor with the tablet in my lap. I scrolled backward. 1 week, 3 weeks, 2 months. The messages did not describe one kiss. They arranged meetings around my night shifts and Julian's construction deadlines. They complained when family dinners made them sit across from each other without touching. They promised to stop, then chose another afternoon, another hotel, another excuse. 4 months earlier, the tone changed from flirtation to secrecy. I reached the earliest surviving message and saw enough to understand what it meant. I could not make myself read it twice. I moved forward instead, finding the future I had trusted dismantled date by date. One photograph showed Sabrina drinking coffee in my kitchen. The timestamp came from a night when I had been caring for a 6-year-old patient whose lungs kept collapsing. I remembered texting Derek at 3 a.m. to apologize for missing dinner. He had told me not to worry and said he was already asleep. In the photograph, Sabrina was holding my mug. I called Aisha. She answered on the 3rd ring, her voice thick with sleep. "Camille? I need you to come over." She heard something in my voice and did not ask whether it could wait. "Are you safe? Derek isn't here. I'm leaving now." While I waited, I put the tablet into airplane mode, afraid that Derek would erase the thread remotely. Then I worried that touching anything had already damaged whatever proof existed. I set it on the table and backed away. Aisha arrived 17 minutes later in sweatpants beneath her coat. She looked at my cheek before she looked at the tablet. "Who hit you?" "Sabrina." Her expression tightened. "Start at the beginning." I told her what I had seen. I expected the story to sound less certain once spoken aloud. It did not. Then I showed her the tablet. Aisha read the deletion instruction, scrolled far enough to see the dates, and placed both hands flat on the table. "This is not a misunderstanding," she said. Hearing someone else say it ended the last small argument inside me. I had not imagined Derek's hands around my sister. I had not caused Sabrina to strike me, and whatever happened to the wedding next had begun long before I opened that door. Aisha sat beside me and asked what I wanted to do. "Tell Julian." "Tonight?" I checked the time. It was almost 11. "Before he marries her." "That is not the same answer." She nodded toward the tablet. "Do you want to warn him, or do you want to make sure he understands?" The difference mattered. If I sent one screenshot in anger, Sabrina could call it a joke or an altered image. Derek could claim it lacked context. Julian deserved more than an accusation delivered while all 4 of us were panicking. "I want him to understand." Aisha helped me preserve the thread without changing its order. I began a continuous screen recording at the account page, opened Sabrina's profile, and moved through the conversation slowly enough to capture names, dates, photographs, and voice note markers. We exported what the tablet allowed, then photographed the message sequence with my phone while the original remained visible. We did not need every flirtation. The evidence became stronger when we organized only what established identity, duration, completed meetings, and concealment. The most recent message proved that Sabrina and Derek were coordinating a lie after I caught them. The photograph in my kitchen connected the affair to a date I could verify through my hospital schedule. Several exchanges named hotels and times. The earliest message established when the physical betrayal began. Aisha stopped at one exchange from 6 weeks earlier. Sabrina complained that Julian wanted to discuss buying a house after the wedding. Derek responded that I had just transferred another payment into our wedding account. They joked about how seriously we treated promises. I pushed back from the table. "Take a minute," Aisha said. "If I take a minute, I'm going to start explaining them to myself." "Then don't explain. Feel it." That was harder. Anger gave me tasks. Grief gave me the blue dress still hanging in our closet for engagement photographs, the guest list on our dining table, and the knowledge that Derek had handed me food less than 3 hours after arranging another lie with my sister. I removed my engagement ring, but the pale band beneath it looked too exposed. After a moment, I slid the ring back onto my finger. I was not ready for Derek to decide when that symbol stopped belonging to me. I would return it when I ended the engagement to his face. At midnight, I sent Julian one message. I told him I had learned something serious involving Sabrina and Derek and needed to show him documentation privately before the ceremony. I did not attach evidence or describe the affair in a text that Sabrina might see. The message remained unread. I called Marcus. His number was in the wedding group thread. He answered after several rings. "Camille? Is something wrong with Sabrina?" "Yes, but I need to speak to Julian before she knows I've reached him." Silence followed. "What does that mean?" "It means he should not make vows until he sees what I have." His voice became guarded. "You're asking me to interfere with my brother's wedding based on something you won't explain. I'm asking you for 10 private minutes. Stay in the room. If the evidence is not what I say, you can walk me out yourself." He asked whether Julian was in danger. I said not physically. He asked whether Sabrina knew I was contacting him. I said she had told Derek to erase their messages after I caught them together. Marcus breathed out slowly. 11 in the morning. There's a small conference room behind the hotel library. I'll bring him. Thank you. Don't thank me yet. A 24-hour print shop opened its service counter at 1. Aisha drove because my hands had begun trembling again. We printed the screenshots in chronological order, including enough surrounding messages to make selective editing impossible. We placed a small flash drive containing the screen recording and exports in a sleeve at the back. The finished packet was 37 pages. I did not decorate it, label it with accusations, or plan a speech. I slid it into a plain white envelope and wrote Julian's name on the front. By the time we reached Aisha's apartment, Derek had called 14 times. His messages progressed from concern to impatience. He said I was punishing him by refusing to talk. He insisted Sabrina meant nothing to him. Finally, he warned that if I approached Julian without hearing his side, I would be responsible for whatever happened to both families. I turned off notifications. I slept for less than 2 hours. At 7, I woke with my cheek swollen and my jaw sore. Aisha brought me ice wrapped in a dish towel and sat on the edge of the bed. "You can still give Julian the evidence without staying for what happens after," she said. "I'm the maid of honor. You were the maid of honor before the bride hit you for discovering her affair." I looked toward the envelope on Aisha's desk. "If I disappear, Sabrina will say I'm unstable. I need to put it in his hands. Then I'm coming to the hotel." She helped conceal the worst of the handprint with makeup. I put on the dark green dress Sabrina had chosen for the bridal party. My ring remained on my finger. The envelope went into the largest compartment of my garment bag, flat between 2 pieces of cardboard. The hotel lobby was already full of flowers and relatives when we arrived shortly after 9. Aisha stayed near the cafe while I went upstairs. Bridesmaids moved between rooms, carrying steamers, curling irons, and champagne. Sabrina's name was printed in gold across the bridal suite door. I did not enter. Mom found me near the elevators. Her eyes went immediately to my cheek. "What happened to your face?" Sabrina slapped me. She stared as if she had misheard. "Why?" "Because I caught her kissing Derek." The hallway noise continued around us. Mom's expression changed in small stages: confusion, recognition, then calculation. "Where?" she asked. "In the bridal suite." She told him afterward to delete 4 months of messages. 4 months? "I have copies." Mom took my arm and guided me into an empty linen alcove. "Does Julian know?" "He will at 11. Her fingers tightened. "No. You cannot do that this morning." I had expected disbelief. Her acceptance frightened me more. "You understand that it's true. I understand that you're hurt. I also understand there are 200 people downstairs, contracts we cannot cancel, and a groom whose parents crossed 3 states to be here. Those are reasons he needs to know before the ceremony. They are reasons everyone needs time to think. He is about to marry her." Mom lowered her voice. "Let them complete the ceremony. We can sit down with Sabrina, Derek, and Julian afterward when no one is under this pressure." For a second, I could only look at her. "You want him to marry her first?" "I want you to stop treating the most destructive option as the only honest one." Dad appeared at the end of the hallway in his suit, holding a box of boutonnieres. Mom called him into the alcove and told him what I had discovered in quick, clinical phrases. Gregory Rowan looked at my cheek and then at the envelope visible through the unzipped edge of my garment bag. "Dad," I said, "Julian deserves to know." His mouth opened, but Mom answered for him. "Your father understands that families do not survive when people act from shock." I kept looking at him. "Is that what you think?" He glanced toward the bridal suite. "I think we should slow down." That was his pattern. Mom made the decision, and Dad softened its edges until surrender sounded reasonable. "Slowing down means letting him make vows without the truth." "Camille," Mom said, "your sister made a terrible mistake, but if you do this now, there will be no taking it back." There was no taking it back when she made it for 4 months. Mom reached for the garment bag. I moved it behind me. "I am not asking permission." Her face went rigid. "Then do not pretend this is about protecting anyone. You are angry, and you want Sabrina to feel what you feel." The accusation found the oldest weak place in me. For years, I had proved I was different from Sabrina by being patient after she was impulsive, quiet after she was loud, useful after she created damage. Mom knew exactly how to make self-protection resemble jealousy. Then I remembered Julian's future contained in 37 pages. "If I wanted revenge, I would show the guests," I said. "I am taking the evidence to one person in a private room. What he does with it belongs to him." Dad looked down. Mom whispered, "If you leave this hallway, you may lose your sister." I lost her last night. I walked away before either of them could answer. Marcus was waiting outside the hotel library at 10:55. His eyes went to the envelope, then my cheek. "Julian thinks this is about a problem with the venue," he said. "I wish it were." He led me through the library into a small conference room. I texted Aisha the room number and asked her to remain nearby. Marcus closed the door but did not lock it. Julian arrived 2 minutes later with his bow tie hanging loose around his collar. The moment I had been remembering since the beginning of this story caught up with me. He sat. The envelope passed from my hands into his. I told him what I had seen, answered the first questions, and watched him notice the mark beneath my makeup. Then Julian lowered his eyes to the earliest printed message. It had been sent by Sabrina at 6:14 the morning after a venue tasting dinner 4 months earlier. Julian recognized the date before he read the words. He had left that dinner for an emergency at a construction site. I had gone directly to an overnight shift. Sabrina had written, "Last night was a mistake, but not one I regret. Camille is working nights again Tuesday. Julian thinks I'm with Mom. Delete this after you read it." Julian read it twice. His thumb moved over the timestamp as though he could test whether it was real by touch. "She told me she went home with your parents that night." "She didn't." He turned the page. The next exchange confirmed that Derek had driven her to our condominium. Later messages arranged the Tuesday meeting mentioned in the first one. Julian stopped at the photograph of Sabrina in my kitchen. "That's your apartment." "Yes. I was in Cincinnati that week." Each fact connected to something he remembered: a project trip, a dinner Sabrina canceled, an afternoon when she claimed to be meeting a client. Recognition hurt him more visibly than the explicit messages. The lies had not lived in some separate world. They had been fitted inside ordinary days he still remembered loving. Marcus sat beside him. "Do you want me to stop?" Julian shook his head and continued. He reached the message Sabrina had sent after she slapped me. "Delete everything. She saw us. Keep saying it was the first time." Julian put the pages down. For almost a minute, no one spoke. Music drifted faintly through the wall as hotel staff tested the ceremony speakers. "Did you alter any of this?" he asked. "No." I placed the flash drive beside the packet. "There is a continuous recording from the account page through the thread. The original is still on the tablet. Aisha watched me preserve it." He looked directly at me. "Did you see more than kissing?" "I saw enough to know it was not an accidental kiss." "The messages tell you the rest." He closed his eyes, then asked Marcus to bring Derek to the room without explaining why. Derek arrived 10 minutes later. His hair was still damp from the shower, and he had changed into the charcoal suit meant for the ceremony. Relief crossed his face when he saw me. He must have believed the private room meant he could still negotiate. Then he saw the pages. "Julian," he began, "whatever she told you." Julian lifted the first screenshot. "How long have you been sleeping with Sabrina?" Derek looked at me. "You went through my account?" "Answer him," I said. "It wasn't a relationship." "That was not my question," Julian said. Derek loosened his collar. There were a few moments when boundaries got confused. Julian turned to a page containing 3 separate arrangements. Which of these moments were confusing? The room stripped Derek of his usual tools. Reassurance could not change timestamps. Outrage could not erase photographs. He admitted the kiss from the night before, then one earlier meeting, then several. He surrendered each fact only after Julian pointed to proof. Finally, he said, 4 months, but it was never going anywhere. I felt something inside me become quiet. "You plan to marry Camille," Julian said. "Yes, I love her." The word no longer had enough meaning to injure me. Julian looked at Marcus. "Bring Sabrina." Derek stepped forward. "Wait, she's already dressed." "Guests are arriving. You don't have to decide everything in this room." "You both did." Marcus left. Derek tried to speak to me while we waited. He reminded me of 5 years together, the home we shared, and the wedding we had begun paying for. He said he had felt secondary since I postponed our ceremony for Sabrina. I listened without rescuing him from the truth beneath his explanation. "You could have told me you were unhappy," I said. "I tried. You agreed to the date. Then you used my night shifts to sleep with my sister." "It wasn't like that. It is written down exactly like that." The door opened. Sabrina entered in a silk robe, her hair pinned beneath her veil. Mom followed, and Marcus closed the door behind them. Sabrina saw Derek first, then the packet. "What did you do?" she asked me. Julian answered, "She gave me the truth before you could make me promise my life to a lie." Sabrina's face lost color. She crossed to the table and snatched one page. "These can be fabricated." "The original account is preserved," I said. "You have access to Derek's tablet. You could have written anything." Julian pointed to the photograph from my kitchen. "Did Camille fabricate that too?" Sabrina looked at Derek. He looked away. Her denial changed shape. She said Derek had pursued her when she was frightened about marriage. She said she loved Julian and had intended to end everything. She said I had always resented the attention she received and had chosen the cruelest possible moment to expose something private. Mom moved beside her. "Everyone needs to stop. We can delay the ceremony for 30 minutes and discuss this without destroying the entire day." Julian stared at her. "You knew?" "I learned this morning. I am asking everyone not to make permanent decisions while emotional. The wedding is a permanent decision." Sabrina reached for his hand. He moved it away. "I was going to stop," she said. He opened the packet to messages written 3 days earlier, where she and Derek planned to meet again after the honeymoon. Sabrina read only the first line before letting the pages fall. Julian stood. His grief did not become shouting. That made everyone else quieter. "There will be no ceremony," he said. Mom protested that guests were already seated. Julian said the coordinator could keep the refreshments open while families arranged transportation. Sabrina told him he could not throw away 4 years over messages. He answered that the 4 years had not been thrown away in that room. He asked Marcus to contact the coordinator and their parents. Then he gathered the packet and flash drive, not as weapons but as facts he was no longer willing to debate. Sabrina began crying only after he walked out. She turned on me. "Are you happy now?" My cheeks still hurt where she had struck me. No, that was the difference she could not understand. I had not won anything. Julian addressed the guests 20 minutes later from the front of the reception hall. I remained in the library corridor with Aisha. He did not expose Sabrina or read her messages. He said he had learned of a serious breach of trust and could not enter the marriage honestly. The ceremony and reception were canceled. The hotel would keep a smaller room open while guests made arrangements. Confusion spread quickly, but explicit details did not. Julian protected his own dignity without protecting the lie. Derek found me near the service elevator after the announcement. The polished confidence he had worn at dinner was gone. "Come home with me," he said. "We can get through this if we stop letting their wedding decide our relationship." I looked at him for a long moment. Their wedding did not decide anything. I made a terrible mistake. "You made plans. Sabrina meant nothing to me." I removed my engagement ring. The pale line beneath it had deepened overnight. "Then you risked 5 years with me for something that meant nothing." He reached for the ring. I placed it in his palm and closed his fingers around it. "Do not come to the apartment while I'm there. Aisha will contact you about collecting your things." "You can't end us in a hallway. You ended us in my kitchen. I'm only saying it where you can hear me." I walked away before he could bargain with the decision. Mom intercepted me in the lobby. Dad stood several feet behind her, still holding the boutonniere box he had carried upstairs that morning. "Your sister cannot breathe," Mom said. "Julian's family will not speak to us. Do you understand what this has done?" "I understand what Sabrina and Derek did. You could have waited until the guests left. That would have been after the vows. You wanted the wedding stopped." I wanted Julian informed. He stopped it. Mom looked toward Aisha, as though searching for the person who had encouraged my disobedience. "You have always thought being calm makes you right, and you have always thought Sabrina being upset makes her innocent." Dad finally said my name. I turned to him. Part of me still hoped he would cross the distance between us and say what he had been unable to say upstairs. He looked at my uncovered cheek and whispered, "Maybe everyone should go home." It was not defense. It was another request for the conflict to disappear. "That is what I'm doing." Aisha picked up my garment bag. We left through the side entrance while relatives gathered around the canceled seating chart. I did not stay to remove flowers, explain rumors, comfort Mom, or find Sabrina's missing shoes. For the first time in my life, my sister created a disaster, and I allowed it to remain hers. The immediate consequences were painfully ordinary. Derek moved into an extended-stay hotel for 2 weeks, then rented an apartment near his office. Aisha remained present while he collected his belongings. Our landlord removed my name from the renewal and accepted Derek's early termination payment, allowing me to leave the condominium at the end of the month. We divided the wedding account according to documented contributions. Vendors refunded what their contracts allowed. There was no hidden fortune, dramatic lawsuit, or career collapse, only invoices, boxes, signatures, and 2 people separating a future that had once seemed shared. I chose a smaller apartment near the hospital. The first night there, I ate dinner on the floor because my table had not arrived. The silence hurt, but it belonged to me. No one was using it to hide anything. Sabrina moved temporarily into our parents' house. Within days, she contacted Derek and suggested that, since both engagements were over, they no longer needed to pretend. Derek refused. He told her the affair had never been a plan for a life together. She had destroyed her marriage for a man who had expected to return to mine. Julian ended all private contact with her. His parents handled the remaining vendor disputes, and Marcus collected Sabrina's belongings from the apartment she had shared with Julian. Julian never used the evidence publicly. When relatives eventually learned the reason, it was because too many people had witnessed enough of the private confrontation for Mom's preferred story to survive. Mom called me repeatedly during the first week. Her messages moved between concern, accusation, and requests that I speak to Sabrina before she did something reckless. I answered once. "Is she in immediate danger?" I asked. "She is devastated." "Then stay with her and contact a professional if she needs one. She needs her sister. She needed her sister when she made each of those plans." I ended the call. After that, I restricted Mom's number. Love had always made me available to my family. Boundaries taught me availability was not the same as love. Dad sent short messages for several months. At first, they contained apologies for how painful the weekend had become, which still placed the event at the center instead of his choices. I did not answer. 4 months later, he asked to meet me alone at a quiet cafe. He did not bring Mom or ask me to forgive Sabrina. He admitted that he had spent years watching Mom place responsibility on me because opposing her created conflict. He said his silence in the hotel had protected Sabrina and abandoned me. It was the first apology from anyone in my family that named an action without immediately explaining it away. I did not restore our old relationship. I agreed to meet him for coffee again the following month. Limited trust had to be built from limited promises kept. Later, Dad stopped sending messages through Mom and stopped asking me to interpret Sabrina's progress. When Mom complained that I was punishing the family, he did not forward her words or ask me to soften mine. He simply kept the coffee plans he made and accepted when I declined others. Those changes were small enough to be believable. They also mattered more than a dramatic promise. For the first time, he was learning that supporting me required action when it was uncomfortable, not sympathy after someone else had already done the damage. Mom's apology came later and remained conditional. She acknowledged the affair was wrong, then returned to the cost of the timing. I told her we could speak again when she understood that Julian's consent mattered more than a reception. We remained distant. 6 months after the canceled wedding, Julian sent me a brief message. He said he had moved to a different neighborhood and returned to work. He thanked me for giving him the information privately and allowing him to make his own decision. He did not ask to meet. I did not turn shared betrayal into a new relationship. We had protected each other once by refusing a lie, and that was enough. Sabrina's letter arrived 2 months later in an envelope with no return address, though I recognized her handwriting immediately. I left it unopened for 3 days. When I finally read it, she did not mention Julian's family, deposits, guests, or Derek's rejection. She acknowledged the affair, the slap, and the message ordering Derek to erase evidence. She wrote that part of her had wanted proof she could be chosen over me, even though I had spent our lives choosing her. She admitted she expected Mom to pressure me into silence because that system had protected her before. She said she had begun therapy. She did not call herself healed. She did not ask me to forgive her or respond. She wrote that whatever relationship we had in the future, if any, had to begin with her telling the truth without demanding that I make the truth easier for her. I cried after reading it, but I did not call. An apology could be sincere without becoming a key to the door it had once broken through. I placed the letter in the top drawer of my desk. I did not throw it away, and I did not display it as proof that everything was repaired. That evening, I joined Aisha and 3 colleagues for dinner at a small restaurant near the hospital. No one needed me to settle an argument, fix a seating problem, or protect the most volatile person at the table. When Aisha raised her glass to an ordinary Friday with no emergencies, I laughed without checking my phone. For years, I believed keeping a family together meant standing inside every disaster until everyone else felt safe. Now I understood that sometimes the most honest thing you can do is place the truth in the right hands, step away from the consequences you did not create, and let silence belong to you again.